Hello, everybody. Welcome to this event that we're doing, this Facebook Live workshop. Today, we will be talking about losing relationships through mental illness. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, anything like that, please leave it in the comments. We are live for now, so we'll be able to answer them. My name is Tony. My pronouns are he, him, if you have to know. And if you have any questions for me, ask them. But to my, I never get this right. This side is Sylvie. Sylvie, introduce yourself. Who are you? And where
Well,
do you
you're better than
bring
I
that?
am. I don't think I would know.
I'm like all over. I never get it.
So I'm Sylvie, and I'm a colleague of Tony at AMI-Quebec, and I work mostly with family members, partners, and friends of a person who has a borderline personality disorder or a difficulty to regulate emotions, mostly.
Okay. And which is actually going to be quite relevant, I think,
I think so.
for this discussion. It's a pretty a tough one. That being said, before we really get into this, I am going to ask you a question.
Oops,
And
I'm scared now.
yeah. So here's my question. If you
Okay.
had to choose to live the rest of your life rent free, would you rather live in the city or in the country at least 1 hour away from any urban hub? So that's what I mean by country. So like rural living. And why?
Mm,
What do you think? What would be your choice?
I honestly, I would not live in the country.
Okay.
No, no.
Why?
I loved, I love why? Because
Yeah.
I love being there to relax,
Yeah.
to just unwind and appreciate the beauty of nature and all that. But living there 100% of the time,
Yeah.
I don't, sometimes I like to, try new things, take workshops. I think I would feel a bit as isolated.
Yeah. I think I'm the same, to be honest.
Yeah.
Same for me. I like to go outside and see people I don't know. That's really what it is for me. It's like, oh wait, who are you? I don't know you. All right, cool. And then just keep walking.
Yeah. I would miss that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would miss that.
All right, cool. That's my like opening question here. So
Not, not as scary after all.
no, it
Thank
wasn't as
you.
scary. They're never scary. They're always just weird. It's whatever, literally is whatever is on my mind when I start these workshops. All right, so we're gonna talk a little bit about losing relationships. Um, so I don't really know where to start. So I guess what we could do is we could talk about the different types of loss that we can experience, right?
Yeah.
Because there's, and I'll name a couple ways, and maybe you can think of some too. And like, there's like being estranged from a loved one, where you don't have even any kind of like connection. You are just as far as you're concerned, they don't exist essentially. It's just
Like no contact at
there's
all.
no contact at all. That's
No
like
contact.
that's what I would call like an estranged relationship. It's like
Okay.
it's gone, they're not there, you don't talk to anybody, and that's really it. Or talk to
Yeah.
that person. So it's just
Okay.
that's one relationship. And then there's
Okay.
another one which which is death, right? That's a possibility of losing relationships, right? Is like
Yes.
is
Okay.
death is one of the options. And then there's, I mean, what other ways do you think can you think of? That's like two different ways that I can think of right away. The other one is just like difficulty, right? Where it's just difficult to be
Yeah.
around someone.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Now I like the way you put it, Tony. It's like almost like a continuum.
yeah,
You know, it can go from totally no contact
yeah,
or having lost a person because they're no longer there, or and then you continue along a continuum, and then you have okay, maybe you're seeing this person, whoever they are, partner,
yeah,
family, and but it's more like on the surface,
yeah, yeah,
or there might be some difficulty,
yeah,
and then yeah, it's like a continuum where you go towards something more harmonious and
yeah. But then you also have, you have relationships that you don't, you live with the person for whatever reason. you don't have either the choice, or or you're making that choice to not go your separate ways, and you're losing aspects of your relationship with that person despite being in the same place, right? So like, and you know, we see that through all kinds of things where you're distant, or you don't like interact with each other at home, and you're just like doing your own thing. You're like more like just two people living in one space without really
Yeah.
being together. And
Can
then,
I ask you a
yeah,
question, Tony,
yeah,
about that?
yeah,
Because I think it's interesting that you added the dimension of living together.
yeah,
Because we were talking about this continuum where you go from no contact to
yeah,
difficult relationship to, gradation. And then you add a dimension of, but what if you live with the person?
yeah.
You're in this environment. And my question to you would be, how different is that in a way? Because if the relationship is let's say that the relationship is challenging,
Yeah.
okay? It's more on the surface, it's challenging. But in one context, you live together,
Hmm.
and in the other one, you don't.
Yeah.
It's challenging. You see the person, but you don't live together. Like how how do you see it different? Like what's the
Well,
what do you see there? I
the
don't
thing
quite
that
understand.
immediately comes to mind is that space to regroup and and decompress, right? So
Mm,
like if you're in this, well, before we get to that, hang on. One more thing I want to say is there's another option too, which is where you're just absolutely combative. Your relationship is combative, and it's just chaotic and just
yeah,
not conducive
yeah,
to a healthy. And I think that that's like, just if we're going on this like spectrum or continuum here, this is like I'm trying to give like all the different scenarios, right? And so if you're living with someone and sometimes you have difficulties, and then you have an argument,
mm-hmm,
there's not much space there to recover, regroup, to like just, especially as we know now in pandemic times where people are home a lot
yeah,
more. We don't have that ability to like just be in our on our own for a minute, or 10 minutes,
yeah,
or a day, right?
yeah,
Like it's like,
yeah,
okay, like I need to be away from somebody.
yeah.
And and that's like, that space can be really necessary, even in
And you're good.
healthy relationships, right?
And you're good.
Like, like you can have a completely healthy relationship, but people need to have their space in order to do their own thing, to do their own, like, to be healthy, for it to be healthy.
Differentiate to each
Yeah,
have your own life in a way. Even though you appreciate each other,
yeah,
you share things, you're close. You still need to have a life independent
yeah.
too.
It makes it so that you don't become codependent
Yeah, right.
and create unhealthy habits of interaction with each other,
Yeah,
right? It's like
yeah,
it makes it so that you can go from being, you can stay in a healthy relationship and not to this topic that we're talking about of like
yeah,
losing relationships
yeah,
because you're together all the time, you can't do your own thing, and therefore resentment starts to form, anger, like all these feelings that you're just like, you may not necessarily be able to express. I
yeah,
have a hard time with that.
yeah, yeah. I think it's really interesting that you bring that up, Tony. And what you were saying, I was understanding two things. Like
Yeah,
one thing was if we're talking about a couple,
yeah,
for example, this need to have alone time
yeah,
sometimes. And it's such a good point during the pandemic.
yeah,
You know, I think some people during this pandemic went through the pain of loneliness, of
yeah,
living alone, and that's a thing.
yeah,
You couple, I guess it depends how big a space you live in, but not, or maybe not so much. Maybe people live in big house and they still
yeah,
experiment.
yeah,
But if you live in a smaller space, it might be even more intense.
yeah,
So for people who live together, it's that, how do you get that space that you need to breathe?
yeah.
So I heard that in what you were saying.
Hmm.
And beside that, what I think is really interesting, and you didn't use these words, but I'll use these words,
Yeah,
and you tell me if that resonate with you, okay? What about, in my when I meet with people, we talk a lot about how do we regulate our emotions.
yeah,
So, if suppose we have a little bit of a not necessarily a big fight, but a bit of a
Yeah.
disagreement. We're disagreed about something with the person that we live with. It might bring up some stuff in us,
Yeah.
and to regulate ourselves, to calm ourselves down,
Yeah.
we might need to go somewhere,
Yeah.
to go out of the house or
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and in the winter that can be difficult. Like on a day like today, you know.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, it's like for if you're watching this after the fact, or if you're not in Montreal, basically the entire city is covered in a layer of ice right now. Like that's just
so,
that's what's going on right now. Like
yeah,
it rained and froze last night, so
yeah.
there's a thick layer of ice everywhere. Sidewalks
So what
are.
do you do? So Tony, what would you do if
What do
you're
I
stuck in
do?
the house? Yeah, what would you do? You're stuck in the house. There's ice outside. You can't really go out. What would be your way?
I
I'll
mean,
tell you mine now.
okay, for me, I I tend to brave the elements if I really need to do something, or if I need to
Okay.
get away or need to get my own space. I am lucky that I do have other spaces that I can go to. I work on my motorcycle, so that's a space where I can
Never heard of
go.
that.
Yeah, so that's a space that I can like go and just decompress. Would I
Nice.
go through the ice and all that? Yeah. That being said, on days where I don't have the energy to go somewhere, I can put in headphones and I can just go into another room and I can and just decompress in that way. Put on a really bad horror movie on Netflix and just do my own thing. Or,
Yeah,
I'll work on an art project and like not even need headphones at that point. I'll just work on an art project and just put my attention somewhere else.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and and that's one of my like coping mechanisms, I guess, is that like I don't necessarily need to have something different going on. I just need to be able to like focus my attention somewhere else. Just distract me, and that allows me to like get through whatever it is that I'm going through. I tend to not harp on whatever it is that's going on because for
Mhm.
me I find that if I overthink it I will drive myself bananas.
Yeah,
So I just ignore it, which
yeah,
it's not that I'm suppressing it. It's that I'm like, all right, I need to have focus my attention elsewhere, which I think
yeah,
are different ways of coping. And then
yeah.
I can come
Nice.
back with a fresh mind and look at situations and be like, okay, what's
Totally.
going on? Where am I? What am I doing? So that works where I can still be in the same, living area. Like, our living room is big and I can be like, all right, I'm working on this project right now. I'm going to be on my computer doing this and that's it. You know, that's what I
And
do.
and I guess the other question I have is, how do you know? How do you know it's that time? Okay, now I have to do this. You know.
For me, I find that I either start getting anxious and I pace,
Mm,
or I start getting angry. And if I
yeah,
start getting angry, I'm like, all right, why am I getting angry? What am I getting angry about?
yeah, yeah.
I didn't have, I've been lucky that I never, I've never had issues with emotional regulation. And even in my teenage years, I wasn't one to have outbursts. It
Mm-hmm.
does take, I'm a loud person by nature. So, you know, I don't tend to yell in anger,
Mm-hmm.
which is like, it happens. Obviously, everybody gets angry. It happens. But I tend to not, that doesn't happen often. It takes quite a
Mm-hmm.
bit to really like get me worked up. Um,
No, that's interesting, Tony, because Tony and I, we work together.
yeah.
And Tony, I've always admired the fact that you're very much able to speak your mind, you know.
Yeah.
And for me, that's much more of a challenge, much
Okay.
more. It's something I really have to work on, and I'm more on the spectrum of wanting to please, and But you're very much. This is something that you're very much able to do,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering. I think it's interesting what you bring up because I mean, this is just we're just brainstorming.
Yeah. Yeah. We're just talking here.
We have different personality
Yeah.
style, different temperament. And I'm wondering if somebody like you, who's much more affirmé, can speak his mind pretty easily. You don't seem to ruminate about, oh, what will people think of me, or you
Oh
just
no.
speak
Yeah.
it. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, someone like you is, you know, it would it would probably feel like maybe you have less resentment because you speak your mind.
Yeah.
So you don't ruminate this stuff.
It's interesting,
Like
right?
me,
Because yeah,
yeah. So
I like one thing that I've noticed is that I have a few friends. I mean, I have friends, and this comes up often is like when I've been wronged in some capacity, I forget it. I literally I cannot remember why I was upset with somebody. I have a
mm,
very difficult time with that, and it ends up being detrimental in the sense that someone will wrong me. I'll forget why, I'll forget the situation how, and then they'll wrong me again. And then I'll remember, oh, wait, they did this to me again. They did this to me before. And then I'm like, okay, once it's like, shame on me, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, whatever that saying is, you know? And so, like, I try not to harbor resentment because I just try not to have that. Takes up a lot of energy.
you're
And
right. Yeah, it does. Yeah,
and
yeah.
so and I mean, I guess it's relevant to this topic in terms of like losing relationships with friends because I have friends who have difficult times regulating their emotions, and so they'll yell at me, and we'll get into an argument, and for me, once an argument is over, usually unless something really drastic has happened, we're
Mm-hmm.
done. We've
Okay.
yelled at each
It's done.
other.
It's
We've
over. Yeah.
gotten over our beef, whatever's done, and then tomorrow's another day,
You
or
start
next,
fresh.
yeah,
It's like
next
you
week,
have this ability to start fresh.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it's definitely, it might be a coping mechanism that I had through like difficulties in my youth where like I moved a lot too, right? So maybe that's something that I was like, I can't be mad at people. I'm not going to know them in 3 months or in a year from now, right? So like I have to, you know, it's hard.
Can I ask you a question about that, Tony?
Yeah,
Because that intrigues me. So when you say, I can have this major argument,
yeah,
but then after it's done, it's done.
yeah,
Is it really because there's a space in you where you go, there's no point attaching to this stuff. I let it go.
yeah.
So you feel that, you're not suppressing anything. It's just like you're letting it go.
Yeah, that's really
Okay.
what it is. It's just like, all right, it's
Okay.
gone, it's done, it's over.
Okay.
Like,
I'm asking you because sometimes, I mean, I would, because we have different
yeah, we have
personal.
different. Everybody is different, so it's like,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we have some similarity, you
yeah,
and me, but some big differences.
yeah,
And see, I find it really interesting, like this facility, this ease that you have of letting it go.
yeah,
And that's why I was asking you the question, because sometimes it could be talk. Sometimes somebody, I could say, "Oh, I'm letting it go," but really deep down inside, I'm not really letting it go.
yeah,
But you mean it? You really mean it?
yeah. Yeah. There's like, it's interesting, and my partner brings this up with me often, where I'll have a pretty big argument with somebody, and then 6 months later, I'll be like, I wonder what happened to that person. Why haven't I hung out with them? And she'll be like, oh, because they did this thing, and I'm like, oh yeah, they did do that, and that was really shitty, or that was really not cool, And so like I do forget, and it's not. I don't know. I don't.
So if so now it's really interesting that you have this capacity to let go. We can all learn something from you.
But it's bad though. It can be bad though, right? Where it's like, all right, I've forgotten, and so but I guess it just depends on the scale, right? Obviously there's different levels of like, there's relationships that have been lost because we just don't see eye to eye, and that's how it is.
So let's
you know
talk about this.
yeah, let's talk about this because I think
Because
we have a
I
couple
don't know how many
questions
people
too.
are
So
there. We have questions.
yeah, we have a couple questions. So there's a comment, and I want to bring it up because I think it's a really good one.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I think this is something we can speak to. So Laura Lee says, a partner's illness can really change a personality, and I think that's I think this is a very, very good point. And this is something that I think we can address and really talk about. So some of the examples you give are mania, and so for anyone who's not really paying, or who maybe doesn't know what it means by mania, because sometimes that's a confusing word. Often we hear maniac, and that's like, oh man, that person's crazy. They're like angry all the time or whatever. But that's not mania. Like mania at its core is an extreme high. It's like a happiness. It's like you're indestructible. Some of the one of the examples that I give and that was given to me that I thought was really good was someone's in a state of mania. They may go online, purchase all sorts of things online on their credit card because that is how they pay it back is not a concern. They are on top of the world and that's it, doesn't matter. And then when they come down from the mania, all of a sudden they've got hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of dollars of debt that they have to deal with. And it's been to the point where I've heard stories where people are like, okay, I come down from my mania, now I have to return all of these things that I bought to try to recover from this. So that's one example of a mania that, I mean, especially in a partner, that could be a very difficult thing to manage. Delusions, also, go ahead.
So, Tony, in mania, what can be difficult as a partner or as a family member is when the person is in that state, they are so sure that they're right, that they're, whatever they want to do or makes sense, and it's the best thing in the world. And if you try to speak, as a partner or as a family member, you might go, whoa, maybe this is dangerous. You're putting your financial health or even physical health at risk with this choice. The person will get angry at you. So they might be combative and angry at you because they want to do this. So so maybe when the person is not in mania, they're not like that at all. Maybe they're not that combative and they wouldn't fight you.
And that's interesting too, is that mania takes on different forms with everybody. There's no one textbook description for really any of these things, psychosis, delusions, mania. It takes on different forms with different people and how it works. And delusions and psychosis, I'll lump those together because I think that they can be pretty well grouped together. That can be incredibly difficult, right? If someone's experiencing psychosis or delusion, it doesn't oftentimes, and I said this even with mania, oftentimes people associate mental illness with anger and violence. And that's not always the case when it comes to delusions and psychosis. And I think that that's a really important different distinction to make. Psychosis doesn't mean that they're like running around with a knife and they're gonna everybody's a threat. Psychosis can be a lot of different things, and similar to what you just said, Sylvie, when someone's experiencing a delusion, that is their reality. For them, it is real. There's nothing you can say that's gonna say this is not real, and maybe this is inexperience because to be honest, I haven't dealt with delusions that much or people experiencing delusions that much. I don't think you can reason. You can't use logic to bring someone out of delusion or psychosis. I think, and maybe you can. My understanding is you need to affirm their feelings and try to just like ground them back into reality, into what is going on.
It's exactly what you're saying. Affirming the feeling, like the person, if the person is saying, "I think." There are spies and they're coming to get me. You can't really talk about the spies, but you can talk about the fear.
Yeah, you can talk about that. That must feel really scary.
Feel that people are coming to get you.
Or like that must feel really scary. That must make you anxious. How are you dealing with this? What can we do to try to like make you not feel scared anymore? Or like, or you might you feel like you're paranoid. What can we do to like make you feel safe? These are ways of affirming someone and trying to like bring them back out of this delusion and psychosis. But sometimes it just needs to run its course, right? It's not always something that can be worked out.
It's complex.
It's hard, but I think that what Laura Lee's saying about the person can become a stranger, absolutely.
Absolutely. We, people come to us at AMI-Quebec. A lot of our clients are caregiver. People have a loved one who may be experiencing this, and they share this with us, and they share it when they go to the support group, that I don't recognize my loved one.
Yeah.
He's not the one I used to know, and
Yeah.
there's this sense that you feel you've lost them somehow in some way.
Yeah.
Before we Tony, when you sent me a few questions about this workshop, I was thinking it's not my idea. Somebody had told me about this a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this whole concept of, I think they call it ambiguous loss.
Yeah.
Which
Okay.
is, you're not the person. It's not that the person is not there or
Yeah.
died, but they're not the person you used to know.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do about that?
Yeah. I mean, and that's, how do you manage that, right? Is this something that you have to give time? Has the person just changed, right? People change. That's part of living, is changing. And so, if someone is this a permanent change? Is this something that is just a temporary change? Or is this something we have to learn that this is how they are now, right? And we have to negotiate that in our relationships, especially with loved ones. It can be very difficult. It's like, okay, well, this isn't the person I used to know, but if this is how they are now, how do we manage that? Is this someone you still want to have in your life? And which is, it's difficult when it's a family member. It's like, you may have to draw boundaries around what kind of interactions you have with this person and how you interact with them. Like, yes, it may be your parent, it may be your child, it may be your aunt and uncle, but if it's unhealthy for you to be in certain interactions, then you need to draw boundaries and create limits of like, okay, we can still interact, but I don't think we need to be talking about politics, is one boundary that someone might have. Especially, we're like, okay, we can do this. Let's not talk about that,
Yeah.
And we can maintain a healthy relationship within those bounds. Because at their core, it also depends, right? If at their core they're still respectful and, that's the important part.
You know what you said earlier, Tony, when you were talking about affirming, validating. Yeah. I think that can still be used with the boundaries.
Yeah.
Like, when you say, we're not going to talk about politics, or sometimes there's a way to suppose, somebody really wants to talk to you about something that bothers them a lot. And, it's going to go in a direction where you're not sure you have the energy, that you're not sure you want to go there. So what do you think? Do you think it would make sense? I'd like to have your opinion on this. To say something like, I can see this is really important to you, that you really care about this. Like, you validate, you recognize that this is something that's important to the person.
Yeah.
And I can't really go there with you. So you recognize, I recognize this is important to you. You're not completely saying, I'm not going to talk about politics.
Yeah, I think tact is everything. Tact is everything, and how you approach this conversation is really important. And I find that that's really important for me with friends, right? Like, I have significantly left-leaning politics. I have very clear distinctions for me on like what I think is acceptable and what is moral, immoral, all these things. And I have plenty of friends who completely disagree with my politics, but at their core, we have the same mutual respect for the value of life, the value of people, and just like society as a whole. And I think to me, if you're at that core, then it's like, okay, that is where we agree. And if we don't need to necessarily agree on the minutia of things, and talking about it is just going to make us argue. But if we know at our core that, we can agree that people need to be able to live lives that aren't in fear and aren't being repressed, and you're not like putting your boot on their neck, then, this is cool. That's where we can just like leave it at that, and that's what you're saying, like I get what you're saying. I hear you. I don't agree, but we don't need to argue about it. We don't need to talk about it. We don't need to do anything like. And it can be very difficult because sometimes there are core values that you just disagree about. And maybe then that's a time where it's time to part ways and you're like, okay, we just, at our core, we don't agree. And if you don't agree with someone at the core, you don't have to be friends with everybody. That's something I've had to like learn over time because I'm friendly. I talk to a lot of people through various things in my life. and I don't have to be friends with everyone. I don't have to disrespect people.
Yeah.
And I don't have to like go out of my way to let them know that I disagree. I'm just like, all right, cool. We don't need to be friends. That's fine. We can be social and like, hi, how you doing? Passing each other on the street, like your neighbor. It's imagine, like good fences make good neighbors, right? And or fences make good neighbors. Whatever that like saying is. I'm really bad at my sayings today. It's because it gives you that clear line of your boundary of like, all right, this is our space, this is your space, and this is where we're like, we live in our own areas, and we can say hi over the fence, and that's cool,
So when you say Tony, let me ask you something about this. Yeah, because I think, you're giving the example of a neighbor.
Yeah.
Anything where you say, I don't think I'm going to hang out with this person,
Yeah.
but I can respect them, and, there's a certain level. It's not going to go above a certain level or something.
Yeah.
So, how do you tie this with expectations? Because I can see how we could bring in expectations in this. Do you see where I'm going with this?
I don't. Like, I'm trying to think of like, what do you mean? Give me an example. Okay. I work on examples really well.
I'll give you an example. You're giving the example of a neighbor.
Yeah.
But it could be it could be a neighbor. It could be, let's give the example of a neighbor. What if your neighbor, you think, that's where it stops for me.
Yeah.
I'm happy to say hello. I don't want to go further. Okay.
Yeah.
What if your neighbor has an expectation that he would like to hang out with you?
I mean, cool. Let's hang out over the fence,
So that's how you would deal with it?
I mean, but I think it's just managing friendships. It's just, finding out what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with, right? Like, can you just pass each other and saying, yeah, we're picking up the garbage, we're doing this, we're like, outside, if they want to have dinner, you just say, I'm busy. People
so
get
No, that's interesting. What I'm hearing from what you're saying, Tony, is that in a way, the example that we just gave, you're very comfortable. You're comfortable where things are at.
Yeah.
And it's for the other person in the example that we're giving to manage their expectation about you. Because at some point you have to sense, well, maybe that I would like to know this guy better. I would like to hang out with him.
Yeah.
But he's sending me some cues that, for whatever reason, doesn't mean I'm a bad person. But it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So.
But also, people
I manage my expectations.
Yeah.
About you.
Yeah.
Right.
So we have a couple questions, and one of these is actually quite relevant to this expectations. And I think this is actually a really good one. Laura, you asked, so Hella and Laura both asked questions. I will get to them. But I'm going to jump to Heather's question just because we're kind of talking about expectations. And I think that this is a good time to talk about that. So Heather says, when I get sick or depressed, that they pull away from people, including friends. A normal thing to happen. Months and even years can go by before you're feeling better, and then you find yourself without friends. Also, this is a very common experience. How can you reconnect knowing that this could happen again? Okay, so this is a tricky one, right? It's like, in terms of expectations, this is what came to mind when you said expectations, is this is a good time where you can just say, I was going through a rough patch, and I needed some time alone. And, I have friends who I know right now are going through very rough times, and I still reach out to them once a week, every 2 weeks, to send them a text message. I'm like, if you want to come hang out, I'll be here at this place at this time. And I just try to keep that door open. And when they're ready, they'll come and say, oh, okay, cool, I'll be there. And if they're not, and there are people that I've been texting for, months that, I haven't heard back from them. And that's fine, because I'm going to take this question down because I want to be able to talk to Sylvie, Actually, I'm going to put the question back up because I think it's good for people who are watching to know what we're talking about.
And, before we continue, I just want to say thank you, Heather, for this question. Because it takes a lot of courage to write up a question like that, putting yourself out there. Yeah. And, that's really beautiful. I want to thank Heather for that.
Yeah. I want to, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly this is a, Laura Lee is giving an answer to this question, which is Laura Lee says they invited an old friend for coffee and told her that they wanted to apologize for pulling away, and it was totally their fault due to a depression, and that her friend hadn't been aware, and now they're close again. And so I think, and we're going to go back to Heather's question here. I think that people, for the most part, are pretty understanding of this. Even if you parted ways in a conflict and you haven't talked to each other for however long, if you can acknowledge that maybe what you were going through was some of that conflict, or if you think it was them, sometimes bringing that up, it might be hard, and it might be that you lose that relationship, but at least you addressed it. And I think that's the key, to like being able to reconnect with friends, whether you left in conflict, whether you left in just because people grew apart, because you're having a hard time, or they're having a hard time, or you're busy, or there's a lot of reasons why. I don't know. I think people are quite reasonable, especially if it's someone you were close with,
I think, especially if like Heather, when I read Heather question, just the way Heather, you bring it out, you speak in the I.
Yeah.
You're not saying, oh, this person just, they have no heart, they just abandoned me.
Yeah.
You're really just talking about your own experience. And
Yeah.
I think when you're able to approach someone like that and be really truthful and talk in the I statement and talk about your own experience, and you're not blaming them, and I think people will open up much more than we would expect.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I can't say that I've ever had anyone do this. I'm trying to think of like.
Okay. So interesting.
Yeah.
What if you had a good friend? I think we can imagine the situation that you haven't talked to in 3 years.
Yeah.
And they're coming back and they're telling you what Heather is saying in her call.
Oh, I would be thrilled, because in my head, I've probably worked out a million different scenarios where I thought I did something wrong that pushed them away. And that's just because I was like, I pushed them away in some way. I have a friend right now that I know he had a baby. I haven't talked to him in probably 3 years. And I'm just like, I was talking with another friend about it. And he's like, yeah, man, he got busy, And I'm like, all right, I'll leave it at that. And I'm sure, who knows, it might be another 5 years. We will reconnect. And as far as I'm concerned, like, he didn't do me wrong by just not being around. It's just, relationships come and go. And I think that's also some relationships have an ebb and flow. And you'll be apart for years, and then you come back, and, it may not be the same, or it might be exactly the same. But yeah. I think we have to be able to accept where they are. This is where our relationship is now.
Yeah, that's a good point, Tony. I think that there are a number of people who will welcome us back with open arms, especially if we're truthful like Heather is, and we're able to put our heart out there on the table. I think a lot of people will, understand our situation, and some people might not.
Yeah.
It might happen.
Yeah.
And then I see it as, then how do we build new connections?
Yeah. I mean, that's really hard, right? That's the age-old question, is how do you make friends as an adult? Which is, maybe we should have a whole Facebook Live about that, because it is very challenging. It is incredibly challenging.
When you say it's challenging, what do you mean? In what sense?
All right, I'll give some examples. Like, if you, in your high school years, you are forced, in your school age years, university, CJEP, whatever, schooling years, you are forced to be around these people all the time, 40 hours a week, or work, you're forced to be around these people all the time. So you naturally will come closer to others, pull apart from others, and you'll create circles of groups of friends in that capacity, because you are around and you're forced to be with more people around you all the time. So you're going to interact with more people. Now, I don't drink, right? And so I left university, and so my circle just went from potentially having thousands. I went to university, thousands of people around me where I could meet new people. I'm talking, I could do this, I could do that. To now, I work at AMI-Quebec. I have 10 people in my immediate circle, right? And I like everybody that I work with. I don't necessarily hang out with people that I work with, but that doesn't mean that I'm not friendly with them. You know, if they invited me to donuts or whatever, yeah, cool, let's go do it. I'm like amicable to that. But in terms of people that I would like actually like, you know, I'd seek out friendships and relationships with, my circle is smaller. So I have to put myself into situations to be able to develop new connections, which is what you just said. How do you make those new connections, right? So I have hobbies, and that's how I meet new people. And it's hard. It's hard, right? Because it's like, as we get older, we have our friends, and then it's like, oh, here's this new person, but I haven't known them for 5 years, right? So how do I let them into this circle without, you know, like making things a little bit weird? And it's like, it's difficult.
Yeah, it is. It is challenging. You know, we all come with our baggage and our ways of perceiving the world. And sometimes I wonder, maybe when we're younger, if maybe we're not more fresh.
Yeah.
Not just a question that there's a lot of people around if we're in school and all that, but also maybe we're more fresh. We're more, we let people in more, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just.
It could be it, right? Like as kids, we're like the naivete of youth, right? It's like everything is great. Yay!
Yeah, it's like maybe we lose the trust. Maybe it gets a bit harder to trust. Maybe because of some experiences that we might have had in our life that we didn't have before.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's hard, right? Imagine
rejection, you know, the trust, the fear of rejection.
Exactly.
There's a lot going on there.
That it's funny you say fear of rejection, right? Because that's a big deal, right? Like, oh, okay, I joined a shuffleboard club, not shuffleboard, curling club. Shuffleboard is like retiree age stuff in Florida. that's like a retiree park in Florida sitting around playing shuffleboard. I don't know why. Like, so curling. Let's say.
Why did you start doing it? What are you talking about? I'm just kidding.
I don't know. I don't know why that's what came to mind. Let's say curling, right? Because and curling is just funny because it's in the Olympics and it's like it's a big deal. I've never gone curling in my life, but I know that there's like facilities for it, and it seems like a cool thing to do.
People have so much fun.
Yeah,
they hang out and they develop really nice friendships around here.
Exactly, right? So this is, let's say I go to this curling club, I get a whole group of friends, something happens, and let's talk about, you know, I'm going through a depression and I'm having a difficult time and I lash out because that's how I cope, or that was what happened at the time. I got angry, I yelled at someone, and they were like, nah, we're not talking to you anymore. And so now you've been rejected from this social group and you're like, okay, how do I put myself back out there again? Right? That's difficult. That's what I mean by like, it's like, okay, and it's what you're speaking about, right? Like we have our own experiences and baggage around past relationships and past friendships, you know? It's hard.
We might be afraid that history will repeat itself.
Yeah.
You know, that we might experience this again. That's why sometimes we need help. Sometimes we need to see a therapist.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
to work through our own emotions and work through how to cope and how to just be another person. All right, so we've got another question, which is here. Heather says, "Thank you for addressing your question." Thank you again for the question. I think that was really like a great question. So I'm gonna scroll back up here to Laura's question because I think that this is a very big one, and this is something that, you know, we can talk about it. I'm sure Sylvie has a lot to say about this one, actually. So how about a lot of built-up resentment from the unaffected partner affecting the relationships? How do we work through this? So this is like, this can be a loved one, this can be a friend, this can be an intimate partner. It can be really like, this can run the spectrum of a lot of different relationships. I think relationships is a very broad thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I want to understand the question though.
Yeah.
You know, Laura is not there with us. She wrote the question, but I want to make sure I understand it. Built up resentment. I mean, I get a bit confused about from the unaffected partner effect. How do you understand it?
So I understand this is, Sylvie, you and I are in a relationship. I have mental illness and built up resentment from the unaffected partner. So my assumption is that you have resentment. Let's talk about it both scenarios. I have resentment.
We can talk about it both ways.
Yeah, let's talk about in both scenarios, right? So like let's talk first about you have resentment and I'm the one with mental illness in this situation.
Yeah. Okay.
And so you have resentment based on our interactions, based on the struggles, the difficulty that we've gone through. Yeah. Whatever it is. And then the other scenario, just so we're clear, is I have resentment because you haven't addressed these things, because you don't understand how I feel, because you
don't get me. You don't get me.
Yeah, we're just not seeing eye to eye anymore, and so I resent you for not being able to be on the same level as me. Like you just don't get it, right? So these are the two different areas that I see this being. And maybe if you're Laura, if you're still around, you can clarify, but we'll talk about both. And I think that's so let's talk about I'm the one with mental illness and you have resentment, not necessarily or both, you towards me or just in generalized resentment about our situation. So how do we work through that? What's
I'm glad we're bringing this up because in the AMI-Quebec, we meet a lot of caregiver, people who have someone in their circle of care who has a mental health issue. And maybe there has been situations where maybe the person with the mental health issue lashed out or, at certain time said some things, had certain behaviors, or that has had an impact on the caregiver. And then the caregiver, the other person is a human being. And maybe they received that, and maybe they took it very personally, and maybe they're hurt, and maybe, they do have resentment. So what do you do if you are the person who is the illness and says, my loved one who doesn't have an illness right now, I can sense it, they're resentful.
Yeah.
Then what do I do about it? I think, a person can open up about it and say, I sense that there's something going on. There's something there. You want to talk about it? And then you can do it in a non-defensive way, like a way like, I want to be close to you, so I want to understand. I feel there's something going on. I think that can be done. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. And it's interesting because Laura Lee left a comment earlier when we were talking about someone coming back to a relationship, and Laura Lee said it can be better with honesty and maturity. And I think that even in this scenario, that's if you're approaching it in a mature and not in an aggressive way, I think that's important. I think that we oftentimes are feeling resentful and have feelings, and we feel as though we need to address them right then. And that may not be the best time to address those feelings, right? And I think that that's what's key, is that if you're feeling resentment, wait until you're having a good day. Wait until things are feeling good. And you're in a different headspace to bring this up. And I think you're in a way where you might be better equipped emotionally to handle what they say or to respond. And
you bring a good point. You have to be ready to hear what they're going to say.
Yeah, like if we're coming at something with resentment and we're already angry and we're trying to talk about it, I mean, maybe it'll go fine. Chances are the conversation's going to go downhill pretty quickly. That's it's difficult. And it's difficult, if we're in a constant feeling of resentment and anger, then this is where maybe you need to take some time and space away from the person to be able to regroup. How we talked about earlier.
I like what you're saying, Tony, because I think that for the person who has the resentment, if they're carrying something that they need to work through, this might take a while, and this might be work that they have to do on their own.
Yep.
And then for the person who's waiting for the resentful person to change, it might be frustrating because they would like this person to be on the level and talk to them and say everything is all right. But sometimes there are limitations. Maybe the person is limited.
Yeah.
They're limited in where they can go right now.
Yeah.
That's so easy to accept for the other person.
I have a really good example for this.
Yeah.
So there's someone who's been dealing with substance use. They're dealing with alcoholism, and they're hiding it from their partner, right? Which is a very common scenario for someone who has substance abuse or substance use issues, or, you know, they hide it from their partner, and it's their coping mechanism. And when they're using substances, they pull away from their partner. They aren't as, you know, they aren't sharing the same experiences with them. They're trying to, like, they're going off in their own, they're going into a depression. They're doing all these, there's a lot of things that can come with this. And finally, the person who has the substance use issue says, this is what's been happening, and I feel bad about it. I'm going to work towards fixing this. Now, the partner says, why didn't you tell me this? Why were you hiding this from me for 6 months? I don't feel like I know you. You aren't who I thought you were. I need time to figure this out. We need to go our separate ways. Right?
Yeah.
And so this is where it gets difficult, right? Because you have one person who is working they can be working really hard to correct what they felt they were wronging their partner. That can be a romantic partner, that can be a parent, that can be a child, that can be it can be a friend, right? And just because one person is working on their relationship doesn't mean the other person is ready to accept that person is doing that, right? Like, they've been going through 6 months of this feeling of the person pulling away and the person hiding things, and that can be a betrayal of trust, right? It's like, okay, so why didn't you tell me that? I'm your friend, I'm your partner, I'm your parent, I'm your child, you know? You could have told me this, and we could have worked on this together. But that's not always how it works, right? So this is, and I think that's what when you were saying it takes.
Great example. That's a great. I love that example. That's a great example because, see, on one side, the person who has the substance abuse issue.
Yeah.
You know, they're asking their loved one, please understand me.
Yeah.
You know, this is something that I'm trying to fix now, and I hid it maybe because I was ashamed of it.
Yeah, there's a million reasons why you would hide it. You know?
They want to be understood, and they're willing to fix, but they're asking for some understanding about this experience that they've been through. But you could say the person on the other side is asking for the same thing.
Yeah,
they're asking for the same thing. Please understand that I'm also going through an experience. And my experience, I feel betrayed. And it might take a little while for me to get over it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's...
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's... And it's interesting because I have a friend going through this, which is why it's like... When I heard that scenario, I was like, oh, wow. You know, it's something that I probably wouldn't have been able to, like, think of this on my own, you know, without hearing it from someone else, because it's just like... It's so telling in terms of, like, losing a relationship. You have two people who are in very different places dealing with the same thing from two different sides of the coin, right? And so I don't have an answer, right? Like, I can't tell you, you know, there is no one answer. What I can say is that when the people are ready to go seek therapy together, counseling together, and talk together with a neutral party, right? And try to work out those issues together. And maybe they're both in a place where they can do that without a neutral party. They can, like, all right, we'll meet in this neutral space. We'll meet at a picnic bench on the canal, you know, and we'll have lunch and we'll try and talk about some things. But it may not work. Someone might get angry in that conversation and just have to leave because they can't process those emotions right now. Or it might be a week, it might be months, it might be irreconcilable differences, right? It might just be, I have felt betrayed, and that's not something that I can forgive, but I cannot forget, and therefore I can't move past.
Yeah. It could be that the person who's experiencing the betrayal is triggering all sorts of ways about that, and they need to go on their own to heal.
Yeah.
You know, like work this out. Yeah.
Anyway, so this is like I know I like that scenario. I mean, I don't like it, but
it's a good example.
It's a good example of, like, that I think people can wrap their head around, because we don't have to use substance abuse in the scenario. There can be a lot of different things that you pull away from someone because you're feeling depressed, you're feeling, and you just didn't talk to your partner about it. It happens.
Yeah.
It's a normal experience. So one question that Hella gave, and I don't know that we have an answer to this, is why do people run away from people with mental illness and we lose friends and family? And so, I mean, I'd be interested in hearing your insight. My immediate response to this is that sometimes people don't have the capacity or the ability to handle that on their own. It's not about you. It's about their ability to manage their expectations, their boundaries, their limitations, all these different things. And so it may feel like they're like pushing you away or they're running away, but it could be that they're creating a boundary, that a limitation that they can't deal with. And I think it's hard, but it's also fair, right? And we have to accept that,
I really love that. I think that's an excellent answer. I mean, I love that, because I think that what you're bringing up with what you're saying, Tony, is, yes, of course, we talk about stigma, and sometimes, you have a mental health issue, maybe people won't understand, maybe some people will judge, and there will be stigma. And that's real, that happens.
Yeah.
But I think that there's also a big percentage is exactly what you're saying, and I don't think it's often addressed.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed, scared that they can't handle it.
Yep.
They might have their own trauma and difficulty that they don't want to look at, and you're triggering them unintentionally.
Yeah. That's another valid point, right? Is like you can be triggering someone from their own trauma that they've experienced.
It's not that they don't want to hang out with you, but they're going through their own stuff, and maybe you don't see it, but they're going through their own stuff.
Laura Lee brings up a good point, is like a lack of knowledge and fear of the unknown, right? That's fear, and that's a valid emotion. It's it's to be scared. I mean, I think I know I'm loud, I'm opinionated, and I can be imposing, and I work on trying to not be that way, but I know that pushes people away. People are like, whoa, I cannot deal with you. You are too much. And that's like, all right, cool, I get it. Or they're like, I can deal with you in small amounts. And that's fine. Like, I get it, I understand it, and I think that's just like, we have to be able to understand where people are coming at from.
Yeah. I think it's really, I think it's really great how you're able, not many people have this capacity to see, oh, I know this about myself.
Right, but I don't
like that.
I think it's really great. I think it's important though to, I think the other side of that coin is that people I'm just an asshole and you have to deal with it. And I think that's where
the line can be
there's a fine line, right? I know, and I work on trying to not be imposing and try to not constantly take over and constantly need to be in charge and let other people do things, and this is something that I'm working on. It's difficult, but I'm actively working on that, and I'm not saying I'm an asshole and you just have to deal with it. If you tell me, hey Tony, you're being loud, I'm like, oh, all right, cool, I'll chill out. I need to relax, and we have to be open to hearing criticism and responding to it, and not just hearing it and being like, whatever, they don't know what they're talking about. I think that's
we all have our stuff.
Yeah, everyone's it's
hard for me to speak my mind. The opposite. So I have to work on that, and so it's interesting. We all have our stuff,
right? But and I think that's everyone has pros, right? It's okay, I know Sylvie has a hard time speaking her mind, so if we're in a group together, and I know that Tony always speaks his mind, he's always going to say, let's do this, and we're talking about going to eat somewhere, I might be like, hey, Tony, shut up for a minute. Sylvie, where do you want to go eat? And sometimes it takes that, directness of being like, hey, Sylvie, what do you want to do? And telling another person to be and in terms of, mental illness, sometimes it's the same thing. It's okay, I can't handle, I personally don't have the emotional capacity to deal with someone who is like extremely depressed right now, because I can't take that on. I can't support you in the way that you need to be supported.
Yeah.
And so I can't be that person for you. We can be this, and try to work around what your boundaries and limitations are. This is what we can do, and this is what I can be for you. But I can't be the one fielding your calls crying. I can't do that right now. And
that's yeah. So it means you being able to do that, to be able to say your limitation, and for the other person to understand that the other person can be there, but not maybe in the way that they were looking for. Not this person, maybe somebody else.
But it's also, it's about boundaries and mutual respect and expectations, and it's making these things clear. Yeah, it's all these things that we've been talking about. Anyways, that was a really good conversation. Yeah, it went faster than I. Everybody had some really, really, really great questions. I really appreciate your insight and like comments and just like helping each other with like responses and stuff like that. I think this is like a really good. I think we all have a lot to learn from each other.
We do.
Like we aren't islands. We can't live our lives alone, and I think that's an important. That's what I'm gonna. Those are my parting words. Sylvie, what are your? You have anything you'd like to say to kind of like?
I think what I come out of this conversation is that I don't know. I feel really touched about what you shared with me, Tony. About what you said was I know I talked about. And then, it's like it opened the door for me to see, for me, it's hard sometimes to speak my mind. And so I think what's great is that, we're modeling something that it's the more in relationships we can do that, which sometimes is really hard to do.
It is. It's incredibly hard.
This is incredibly hard to do. So I thank you for the opportunity to do that together with the people watching.
Great. I always like having Facebook's lives with you, Sylvie. It's always fun. It's always good. Yeah. It's always like
a happening. It's a happening.
Yeah. So I just want to say, for everyone paying attention and watching and reading the comments, I posted a link. It's the second to last comment there. That if you're a caregiver and you're going through a difficult time, please contact us at AMI-Quebec.org/SOS. We offer short-term counseling. It's not meant to replace long-term counseling and stuff like that. It's to try to like help you get through what you're going through and kind of like get you moving forward and focusing.
And we have to say though that this counseling is for family member who have a loved one with a mental health issue.
Yeah, so it's a family member of a loved one with a mental health issue. That's specifically
or partner, but it's for the caregiver, for the person who's around in the circle of care.
It's the caregiver specifically is who this service is for.
The counseling, But anybody who has a mental health issue and who's looking for resource, anything, they can still call us and we'll give them a call and we can
give us a call. You know what? I'll put our phone number right over Sylvie's head. You can call. Connie is there, 514-486-1448. Connie is always there. Someone is always there to answer the phone. And if no one picks up, leave a message. Exactly. Yeah. And the last thing I want to say is we have a lot of workshops that actually cover a lot of the topics that we talked about today. Boundaries, anger, lots of different things. And we also have support groups. Check out those support groups. It's on our calendar. That tells you when everything is happening. Some of the things you have to sign up for, some of them you don't. So just check out the calendar. It's right there on the website. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you, Sylvie, for joining me. Have a nice day, everybody.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Bye, Jackie. Bye.